Okay, so this is section D of the version 2 test on addition and subtraction of fractions. All these ideas that came off of the bottom on section A, all of the same kind of precise, careful work needs to be done here. It's just that these are not simply straightforward. I take this thing and do this to it, and there's the answer. There's more complication to it. So students really need to think. One of the keys here about getting it right or getting it wrong is that students need to recopy their work in layers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of these and I'll show what I mean by layers, but students really need to be careful. Sometimes students will solve things like in circles, and they'll write all over the place, and you don't know where their work is, and that's why they make mistakes. So one of the basic things you should do is you should use this space, use your space here like it's a book. You're always going to start your work up here and you're going to move down, and then you're going to move across, and you're going to move down. Always think like that. Work in the same direction you would read. The other thing to know here is that these questions, there's probably going to be a question where you're asked to compare something. Then there are going to be situations where you might have to add two fractions and then add another fraction, or maybe you have to add two fractions and subtract one, or you have to subtract two, or there's going to be combinations like this. And of course, within all of these, the real challenge is if you have to find common denominators or borrow, your work has a lot of steps to it, and you have to be careful. Reducing to a final answer is still something you want to give. And answering the question clearly. Who ate the larger fraction? How much more did that person eat? How many cups would the person need? How much of the ice cream do they have now? You need to answer it clearly whenever you do these. Don't just leave it up to the teacher to guess where your work is. So I'm going to solve the first one here. Kiara had a bag of candy hearts and a bag of red hots. She ate 5/8 of the bag of candy hearts. Her dad ate 2/3 of the red hots. So right off the bat, it doesn't necessarily sound like they're adding. Who ate the larger fraction? Well, that could be subtraction, unless you can just flat out compare them. So the really useful thing here is to put 5/8 and write the other one 2/3, and then label them. If this is Kiara, put a K here. If D for dad, label them so that you know what you're looking at. And if you're going to compare these things here, well, cross multiplication works just fine. It's a good step for comparison. We always say cross multiply to compare. So I'm going to make them 24ths because that's 3 times 8. And 3 times 5 to finish my cross multiplication is 15. And 8 times 2 is 16. So who ate more? The dad did. He ate more. And then the second question, how much more did he eat? A lot of students got really caught up when I worked with this on making mistakes. Well, isn't that just one more? That's 16, that's 15. You don't have to do anything complicated. You could just say the dad ate 1/24 more, and now you've gotten a point for doing the work, and you've gotten a point for having a clear answer. So think, I'm going to work in layers nice and neat like this. Second question. Brent started making pancakes. He ran into a problem. His recipe called for an amount. From the bag of white flour, he was able to get a certain amount, but then he got the rest from somewhere else. That the rest kind of symbols like it's a subtraction problem here. And again, the problem on the next test the student may get here isn't necessarily going to be this, but you do need to work in layers. You need to be careful and so forth. So how many cups of whole flour would we have needed? Well, in this case over here, we've got 3.5, and he got from it he was able to get 1 3/4, and then you're trying to figure out what's the other side of this, what other amount's going to be needed. Recipe called for this much, he got that much, and so you do your work simply like the other side of the on section A. You're going to have to recopy this. So here's my recopy in layers. If I'm going to have fourths, I'm going to make this 3, and I'll make fourths. I know they're going to be fourths. And teaching your student to do this, like copy down all the numbers that you know are going to be, and then it allows you to focus on the number you have to figure out. So if this 2 became a 4 by doubling it, so it's common denominator, then I have to double the numerator 2, so it's 2. Oops, that doesn't look like I'm going to be able to subtract. What do? Well, I have to borrow, and I'm going to recopy to make this work. So I'm going to make this a 2, and that's I'm taking away a whole, which is 4/4. So 2 6/4 would work here, minus 1 3/4, and that looks like that's 1 3/4 is the answer. And then I want to be nice and clear. He needs 1 3/4 more, or wheat flour if you need to say that, but the main thing I'm asking students to think about here, and the main thing I think it's important, is solve your work in layers. Start on this side and move across as the problem gets longer. This one's a good example of multiple steps. Mauro had, he had some ice cream, and after a while there was less of it, so some's being taken away, and then somebody shows up with more, so that's being added. So this problem really looks like this: 4 4/5 minus the 2 2/3 that have been served, and then added to it the 3 1/2. Well, that's a long problem. But again, if you recopy each step, you're not going to have too much trouble with it. So the first step we're going to recopy here, we're going to make common denominators. And I know it's going to be 15, so this is a good habit of just doing this. 2 and something 15, or 4 and something 15ths, 2 and something 15ths, but copy down the numbers you know you're going to use. How did I make the 5 into 15? I tripled it, so I triple my numerator. How did I make 3 into 15? I multiplied it by 5, so I multiplied that by 5. I'm subtracting, looks like I can. So again, I'm just going to copy things that I'm not